no question the need is there in terms of the volume of requests that we're getting, not volume of dispatches we're doing, the need is there.
Tonight, the growing need for community-based de-escalation services instead of police and emergency personnel.
I'm the first Indigenous woman from my country to win this title.
Enoch Cree Nation's Ashley Calling Bowl makes it to the finals on the international stage.
I wanted to know what happened to these kids, why don't we know more about them, and how come no one's talking about them?
And journalist and author Tanya Talaga stops in Winnipeg during her latest book tour. Good evening, I'm Chris Nachkate. Welcome to APTN National News. Thank you for joining us. More and more community-based mental health response services are emerging across Canada. Instead of deploying police officers or emergency personnel, people with lived experience and specialized de-escalation training is becoming a growing need. Reporter Sarah Bettens takes a look at how other parts of Canada are addressing the issue.
This week marks 3 months since the Alternative Neighbourhood Crisis Response, or ANCHOR, launched in Ottawa's Centertown neighbourhood. By calling 211, residents can request on-the-ground support from ANCHOR crisis workers. Project manager Marissa Delia Ellis says the service meets people where they're at.
Earlier, not necessarily seeing people as the crisis that they are in, but seeing people really as the determinants that have led them there, just allows for a deeper level of care that sometimes might not be able to happen.
ANCHOR crisis workers receive over 200 hours of training. Ellis says most of the staff also have lived experience. Sage McMahon directs the Indigenous-led crisis response through the Toronto Community Crisis Service, or TCCS. The TCCS launched as a pilot in 2022 and expanded citywide in September this year.
This type of work really came out of a lot of community work that had happened for years and advocacy that had happened for years from Black and Indigenous, mostly communities who are advocating that folks really need an alternative response, and one that is based in community, one that is trauma-informed, has harm reduction services.
The Indigenous-led TCCS team is an 85-person mobile response crew dispatched to mental health calls. McMahon says an alternative to calling the police was needed.
When we look at, for instance, missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people and girls, our communities are quite under-policed. But then we also look and see that Indigenous folks are overrepresented in incarceration.
In Manitoba, the Alternative Response to Citizens in Crisis, or ARC program, pairs plainclothes police officers with mental health clinicians like Lucy Stebner. Since launching in 2021, Stebner says the team has helped over 90% of clients remain in the community rather than be transferred to the hospital.
Before ARC, police basically had two options: take them to the hospital involuntarily or attend the crisis response center, whereas now we're kind of doing that for the clients going to their own home or space and providing the help right there.
Last month, the Manitoba government said they were reviewing the Mental Health Act and examining ways to decrease the role of police. A Manitoba government spokesperson told APTN the review is still in progress. In a statement, that spokesperson said they recognize the need for appropriate mental health emergency responses, and groups such as Bear Clan Patrol, the Downtown Community Safety Partnership, and ARC will continue to be funded. John Hoyles is the Executive Director of Community Navigation of Eastern Ontario, which runs the Ottawa 211 line. He says the demand has been through the roof. He encourages other jurisdictions interested in establishing community-led mental health crisis services to, quote, go for it.
There's no question the need is there in terms of the volume of requests that we're getting, not volume of dispatches we're doing, the need is there. And it is such a much better community response to have people with lived experience, people that understand and have really good training on de-escalation.
Some provinces are already following suit. In late September, Nova Scotia dedicated $3.7 million to a 3-year community-based crisis response pilot program in the West Hants municipality. In a statement sent to APTN, a Nova Scotia Office of Addictions and Mental Health spokesperson said it's expected to launch in early 2025. Sierra Buttons, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The Métis Nation, Saskatchewan, is still trying to finalize its constitution after failing to do so at their annual General Assembly in Regina earlier this month. However, Monday's meeting in Saskatoon was more successful. With all regional leaders at the meeting, the MNS Council decided to reallocate funding so their Sacred Michif document could be discussed at the community level. MNS has 62,000 members in 12 regions across the province. With that out of the way, MNS President Glenn McCollum then turned the discussion over to the head of the Meadow Lake Tribal Council. Tribal Chief Jeremy Norman said it was important for both groups to work together.
Moving down the path, joint efforts on many of these things will give us greater outcomes in the future. And I know your president always talks of unity, much like us. And as leaders, when I go to the communities, I speak of that same unity, that we need to support one another. We're stronger together.
The Yukon government has finally opened a managed alcohol program in Whitehorse after months of delay. The Managed Alcohol Program, also known as MAP, supports people with severe and treatment-resistant alcohol use disorder. The program can house up to 10 people and provides direct access to managed, medically supervised doses of alcohol in a safe setting as part of a tailored care plan. The program was supposed to open earlier this spring, but was delayed due to staffing issues. The government is providing $1.3 million in funding for the program. An update now to a story we brought to you last week. Samson Cree Nation elder Elvis Wakinu had his furnace in his new home suddenly stop working on October 20th as the days and nights became colder. The 65-year-old said he contacted APTN National News because his band did nothing to help him while waiting for an ordered furnace part to arrive. Wakinu said he tried to stay warm by wearing heavier clothes. He tried to heat his home with the oven door open and would even warm up in his vehicle with the engine running. Now, Wakinu tells APTN News that after our story aired, his furnace has been repaired and his heat has finally been restored. The furnace repair comes just as nighttime temperatures in the area have dropped to as low as -14 this week.
They finally came and turned on my heat. I don't know what was wrong. I'm just enjoying the heat. I've been taking showers. I really thank APTN for televising my situation.
Lydia Thorpe, the Australian Indigenous senator who heckled King Charles during his visit to Australia last month, is now facing formal criticism by other senators for her actions against the King. On Monday, a motion was carried 46-12 to censure Thorpe as a symbolic gesture to show their disapproval of her actions. Senate leader Penny Wong said Thorpe's outburst is, quote, part of a trend that we do see internationally, which quite frankly we do not need in Australia. During King Charles' visit, Thorpe interrupted the proceedings by shouting, "You are not our king, you are not sovereign," and told him he had committed genocide against Indigenous Australians. Following the censure, Thorpe said she will repeat her rant if Charles ever returns. Meanwhile, a member of the Green Party who opposed the censure said the bubble of white privilege that encapsulates this parliament is a systemic issue. Stats Canada has released a new report on the pulse of Indigenous business in Canada. That story when we're back after the break. Welcome back. Statistics Canada has released some new numbers on Indigenous business survival rates and performance, and they're not good. Their researchers found that Indigenous business ownership did not increase much between 2016 and 2021. And of those Indigenous businesses, 18% were more likely to exit the market. Limited access to capital, financial barriers, and higher operational costs in remote areas were listed as constraints. The performance gap was also 2 times higher in rural areas compared to businesses in urban centers. Stats Canada says the report will be useful for policymakers who want to help support Indigenous people with social and economic integration. Michelle Cameron, CEO of Dreamcatcher Promotions, shared some key challenges faced by Indigenous entrepreneurs.
There isn't a lot of Indigenous businesses to mentor under, so I think that's one of the top 3 probably. Second would be resources, where you can go to there's a lot of financial institutions that will give you a startup loan and a grant. But a lot of times entrepreneurs need help in the middle, like where is their financial support in the middle? And that's not always easy to come by, especially as a First Nation business. It's challenging to acquire financing, especially in your first 5 years. So I find financing is one of the biggest challenges as an entrepreneur.
Tanya Talaga's been out writing about Indigenous issues for 3 decades. The Anishinaabe journalist started out at the Toronto Star in the 1990s. In more recent years, she's become a columnist at the Globe and Mail. Talaga has also wrote 4 books, including her latest one, The Knowing. She's currently on a cross-country book tour that passed through the prairies over the weekend. Talaga recently sat down with our TR Wheatley in Winnipeg to talk about the book, her career, and the path of reconciliation.
It's my recent book right here. And it's called The Knowing. And this book took me quite a long time to write. And it was actually started by my uncle Hank. And it was my mom who was constantly asking me to find Annie. Annie was her great-grandma. My mom is 80. And she said to me, Tanya, you're the journalist. You should be the one doing this. All I had was a death certificate that said that she was a patient at the Ontario Hospital. And in 1930 is when she went into the Ontario Hospital, and the death certificate said she died in 1937. I didn't know how many children she had had before she had Liz, my great-grandma. We found out that Annie, her last name was Carpenter, and that she is from Petabik, Fort Albany First Nation along the James Bay coast. I found out so much more about Annie and her struggle and what it was like for her living through those years of the Indian Act. The book is about my search for her and how she really represents, in so many ways, the lost children, the stolen children, our family members that are gone. Because it was kids at Indian residential schools that disappeared, but our people also disappeared in tuberculosis sanitaria. They disappeared in Indian hospitals and in asylums.
Talks a bit about reconciliation as well.
The TRC, part of the reason why it was written was to sort of give everyone else a push, right? To go out there and to do this work. In 2015, everyone was talking about genocide. Oh my gosh, they've used the word genocide. And so I actually wanted to write a book then. When I pitched Seven Fallen Feathers, my first book, to my publisher at the time, and my editor said, write Seven Fallen Feathers first, and then write this book. And then when Kamloops happened, it became apparent to me that it was all the same story. It's also interwoven.
Yeah, similar with my great-grandma as well. Because I grew up with my great-grandma, and she always told us stories about her mom. We don't really know. We know she spent time in a sanitarium. We know she was found on train tracks. Indigenous families, sadly, that, yes, it's the children too, but it's also this missing and murdered epidemic as well.
It's all intertwined. And that's the thing that we understand as Indigenous people, but Canada doesn't really get that. I mean, maybe they're starting to get it now because we've been screaming about it long enough. And, how many inquiries and commissions have we talked about this and tried to show everyone the web?
And you also did a documentary?
I wanted to document this as well. I was a journalist at Kamloops when the Lestwewey, the 215, were first announced. And I thought to myself, I have to record this. So I came back a year later for the 1-year anniversary of Lestwewey. And it was there that we recorded things. I mean, I just started to blindly, honestly start recording things because I knew I would use it at some point. And I also knew that there are people that will only watch the 4-part documentary series.
How long were you doing journalism? And kind of just the evolution of reconciliation. I mean, at one point you're in the Toronto Star. They've had some questionable stories in the past about Indigenous people.
Well, I was a journalist at the Toronto Star. I started in 1995. And being a journalist in 1995 was a bit different than now. There was not acceptance really for our stories. It got better once social media came onto the scene, once Idle No More. But it was still hard. It was still hard being a First Nations person working with all non-First Nations people. Well, I wrote 7 Fallen Feathers because I'd been writing stories about the 7 youth. And I started writing those stories in 2011 when I was a parliamentary reporter at Queen's Park. And so I wrote 7 Fallen Feathers in 2016. I wrote 2 books on genocide. And I also covered murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. I was a witness as well at the National Inquiry. I remember seeing we had an editorial at the Toronto Star that said, no, it's not genocide. And I couldn't believe it when I saw that. And it was really hard to be in that environment, especially when you know that it is genocide, that we're still seeing the after effects. And so eventually there was a buyout offered at the Star, and I took it. I started Makwa Creative, which is our a production company. We do documentaries and we do podcasts. And through that, I create my own newsrooms. And it was actually Murray Sinclair that told me, we all know what we need to do in our hearts and in our lives, and we just have to do it. And so getting that push out of the Star was good for me.
I just want to thank you. Thank you for the conversation.
Oh, thank you.
It went pretty fast.
Thank you, TR. Ashley Collingbull, Miss Universe Canada, has made history, this time on the international stage. That story when we come back. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. It was a calm, foggy sunrise over North Rustico Harbor on PEI as oyster fishermen head out. Thanks to Valfae Schaefer for sharing this beautiful photo. If you have a picture you want featured on APTN National News, email them to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, Halifax 8, Charlottetown 8. Happy Valley, Goose Bay 5, and Ujuak 0. Quebec City 9, Val d'Or 5 as well. Peterborough 8, Sault Ste. Marie 8. Elliott Lake 6, Thunder Bay 10. 1 in Churchill, God's Lake 2. 3 in Gimli, Dauphin -4. -12 in Swift Current, Saskatoon -5. -6 in La Ronge, Buffalo Narrows -8. -16 in High Level, Peace River -11. Calgary -10, Edmonton -8. Campbell River 7, Kamloops 0. Prince Rupert 7, Dease Lake -14. Old Crow -31, Rock River -24. -26 in Wati, Wrigley -18. -22 in Colville Lake, -27 in Fort McPherson. Baker Lake -9, Cambridge Bay -15. And -1 in Arctic Bay, Aguluk -1 as well. Next time you pull money out of your pocket, take a closer look because there's a new coin in town. APTN's Kim Sullivan is here to tell us all about it.
Now Our Change celebrates Inuit Nunangat and the distinct ways of life, vibrant cultures, and rich heritage that highlight Inuit unity and strength.
On it, you will see the words Inuit Nunangat, a vast area that encompasses land, water, and ice. It is the Inuit homeland from which its people find their strength, resilience, unity, and identity. It is also the inspiration behind the latest commemorative $2 circulation coin released by the Royal Canadian Mint. The Royal Canadian Mint, Inuit Tapirut Kanatami, and 4 Inuit artists, each representing one of the 4 regions of Inuit Nunangat, Nunatsiavut, Nunavut, Nunavik, and the Inuvialuit settlement region, worked closely together in real time through a series of virtual meetings. One of those artists is Tamasi Manyat.
We spoke quite often over the telephone. Internet wasn't always reliable, so we tried a bit. But once we worked together, once we worked on our own artwork, we shared them amongst the group. So we got to see what we made, and then we started putting pieces together, modifying our own images, so it turns into a unified image on a coin.
On the outer rim of the coin, we find a traditional pattern and 4 distinct ulus, one from each artist's region.
We heard growing up of Nuleayo. You can look into the story, but her hands were cut, and then in the water, when her hands started bleeding, they turned into animals. And growing up, we're told to respect the animals, not just to kill them, but if we do kill them, we have to eat them. So with the importance of animals, the relationship we have with animals, we wanted to represent them along with Nuleayo.
In the center of the tuni, sea creatures float alongside Nuleayuk, spirit of the sea. This new $2 circulation coin is limited to a mintage of 3 million coins, of which 2 million will be colored. Limited edition special wrap rolls of uncirculated coins are also available for purchase through the Mint. Kim Sullivan, APTN National News, Montreal.
Another cool coin for all those coin collectors out there. Earlier this month, Ashley Collingbull, the recently crowned Miss Universe Canada, traveled to Mexico City to compete internationally in this year's 73rd Miss Universe pageant. Here's a preview of Collingbull during the finals.
I'm the first Indigenous woman from my country to win this title and to ever represent at Miss Universe. So I've made history already.
The pageant finals happened this past Saturday in Mexico City, and while Calling Bull didn't win the title, she still made it to the top 12, making history again as she competed with more than 120 countries. Calling Bull posted to social media saying she was honored to make history as the first Indigenous First Nations woman to be on the Miss Universe International stage. She was also proud to showcase Indigenous designs and bring awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls by wearing her MMIW pin. Calling Bull, who is from the Enoch Cree Nation in Alberta, hopes that all of her work will inspire the next generation of young Indigenous leaders. In the end, Denmark was crowned this year's Miss Universe. Canada has only won Miss Universe twice in its history, first in 1982 and again in 2005. And that's your evening newscast for this Monday, November 18th. We're back again tomorrow for your daytime newscasts. Be sure to join us then. From everyone at APTN National News, hi, miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next day.